My God, it's the triumphant return of Fri-YAY! Welcome back, divas. It's time. I am so sorry that I left you for a couple of weeks, but I'm sure that you survived without me. And I'm just so excited that we're back here together again. Welcome back to Fri-YAY! I'm Megan Enan. This is it was weekly and then take 2 weeks off, I guess. My weekly web series called Fri-YAY, where we talk about music entrepreneurship, we talk about audience development, we talk about creative placemaking, we talk about my deep, deep love of new music. We talk about all those things. And I'm feeling blessed and highly favored that you're here with me today. So, we've got a big question. Well, in fact, this was like a three-part question. That's one question. So Kris asked these questions, and I thought, they all kind of go together, and I wanted to just talk about them here on Fri-YAY because that's what we do. So Kris asked, with respect to being a performer composer or having multiple projects, as repertoire becomes more challenging and composition projects pile up, what's the most effective way to balance or manage your projects? So, first of all, I want to talk about gaining clarity. So, gaining clarity around what you want to be doing. And this also means thinking about most desired outcomes. One of the things that I do with my clients as part of the original framework for whenever we meet and do sessions is talk about most desired outcomes. What is it that you want to be known for in this world, my love? What is it that you want to be known for? So when we think about most desired outcomes, I really want to be thinking about all of the work that I'm doing is leading towards this thing, right? So when Kris asks something like, what's the most effective way to balance and manage your projects? I'm thinking, I want to make sure that you're saying yes to the right projects first, right? So sometimes this is going to include learning how to say no to things. Sometimes this is going to include saying yes to longer term things that are going to be more clearly aligned with what you want rather than many short term things. Or vice versa, one short term thing and then being okay with having a gap in certain things because you know that you're working towards a more clearly defined goal for yourself because that's what you want. Head on back because I think we've done multiple times. If you haven't seen me talk about the 20-year goal exercise here, then head on back to that. That's a really important aspect of this. Defining most desired outcomes really comes out of that work when I do that with clients. And so when you do your 20-year goal exercise, that's what I really want you to be looking at is like in the future, what do I want people to be? What do I want people to think is synonymous with my name? And so when you're saying yes to projects right now, ask yourself if this is in alignment with your 20-year goal self, right? And if it's not, then you can lovingly recommend somebody else who might be right for that project, okay? And and if you are at that point where you feel like you are not getting enough financial or resource compensation for all of the projects that you're doing, that's where I really want you to take another look is are am I saying yes to things that are financially stable? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And that's what you are in charge of. So you get to be in charge of how that works for you. And if you're saying yes to things and the reason that you're feeling burnt out or you're feeling overwhelmed is because you have too many things because that's the only way that you can make rent, then I really want you to be thinking about how you can increase your revenue side of your life. And sometimes that just means having a hard conversation with collaborators and saying, I can't do this project if it doesn't meet this financial or resource threshold for me. And people understand that because we're all in the same boat. We all have to figure out how to make our lives run. So it's okay to have those real conversations. And you can figure out, we've talked about this before, head on back, find that setting your fees video, setting your fees, right? Is setting your own prices means that you know you're not going to be taking on too many projects, running out of time for things without making sure that you're meeting your financial resource needs. Does that make sense? Yeah, I hope so. So I That's the first part of that is as repertoire becomes more challenging and composition projects pile up, what's the most effective way to balance and manage your projects? One of them is at the very beginning of that is like verifying whether or not those projects are aligned with you and whether or not you're supposed like you should be saying yes or not. So making sure that you're taking on the things that you want to be taking on and not taking on the things that you don't want to be taking on. So first things first, right? Okay, now we're into the nitty gritty of what's the most effective way to balance and manage your projects. We've talked about this before, time track. I really want you to figure out how much time does it actually take you to do a thing, right? I want you to be very clear about ancillary time that goes along with it. If you are the kind of composer that needs to go for a run, to like let ideas brew, that is part of your compositional time. So you can't just hack that by sitting down at the computer and saying like, no, I'm just going to burn 8 hours right here in front of this computer, when your compositional process needs you to go do that movement time. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck. You're going to be like blocked, right? And so I want you to think about how much time does this actually take? Include those ancillary aspects of your process so that you are not being caught unaware, right? You're not giving people false timeline expectations because you know what you can say yes to and what you can commit to based on how long it takes you to learn something. This takes time. I understand this. If you're at the beginning of your career, learning how much time something takes is a skill, and you really want to do it. You really want to get in there and understand that as soon as possible. If you're practicing a role, start now. Start figuring out how long did it take me to learn all of Cenerentola, whatever it is that it is for you, right? How long did it take me to learn this role? And so what's the most effective way to balance and manage your projects is first, time track so that you understand how much time it takes you to do things. Second, chunk it down. Once you know how long something is going to take because you have a sense of how long it takes you to accomplish that goal, then you can chunk it down into smaller goals and keep track of those. If you take this idea from the tech world of like sprints or Scrum, I'm looking at you, Shia, right now. So like, that if you take this idea is breaking things down, we've got these big goals that we're working towards. If you're composing, if you are learning a role, etc., you have a big goal that you're working on, and I really want you to practice chunking that down into, okay, I'm going to write this movement, or chunk it down even farther than that. If you're learning it, you're thinking, okay, act 2, scene 3, also just the recits, whatever it is for you. And you're chunking it down and saying, what do I need to know that this is ready to go? So I'm asking myself, not only like, can I do this? I'm doing the work, I'm putting in the time and putting my best learning processes in place for, say, you're learning the role, but then how do I confirm that I've actually done the work? So then you say, okay, maybe I need to coach this, or maybe I need to practice it against a recording, or maybe I need to block it out or something like that. So ask yourself, how am I going to do that? So we've gone through a couple of things here, which is be in alignment with your most desired outcomes, right? Then, so you know that you're saying yes or no to the things that are going to make an impact for you. Then time tracking so that you know what you're capable of in what amount of time. How much time do you need to actually give to the thing so that you know that you're doing it the way you want to? And then that part gets faster usually, right? I'm thinking about writing blog posts or writing grants, for example. At the beginning of something, at the beginning of writing the Sybaritic Singer, the posts would take, a while, but I got it down to, got it down over the course of time because I realized what I was doing and how I was formatting things, what took the most amount of time. Same thing with reviews. So I could get down to, when I was reviewing for the blog, is that I could write the review in about 2 hours, right? So getting to that point where you're able to synthesize your thoughts, get it onto the page, etc. So making sure that you are getting faster and more efficient as you go, that's great. But that requires you to take a look at it and be like, what's the format here? What takes time? Where do I need thinking space? All of that kind of stuff. So, and then we talked about chunking it down, right? So chunking it down into component parts, things that you're able to work on, measure, right? Measure whether or not they are completed, and then starting to bring that all together. Balancing and managing projects also requires that you're able to see your progress or that you're able to track it somewhere. So if you want to use a project management tool, I use a ton of them, but if you want to use a project management tool to help you break down what you're doing, you can go from everything as far as post-its on the wall, right? From a whiteboard with what you're working on at the moment to full on Airtable, like processes that talk to each other and everything's going well. Pick the thing that works for you, right? The system is the system that works for you. So I want you to ask yourself, what do I like working in regularly? What kind of learner am I? Do I need to see it visually and tactile? Like, or can I type it out and that's just as good, right? So ask yourself, do I have a place where I can add tasks and manage tasks outside of my brain so that I could just put it there and check in with it and then be able to cross things off as I go? Balancing and managing projects. And then, so Kris also asked this question, which is, how does one effectively reach a point where your process in one craft can complement the process of another craft? And I love this question because we all wear so many hats, right? I just don't know anybody who doesn't have this kind of ability to switch gears and wear different hats. Like, it's just not a thing that I know of anymore. And so we all wear these different hats, and it works to your benefit to be able to do this kind of complementary work. So if you are thinking about what you're doing in one area and how does it benefit the other, I think about this even in like the nonprofit work that I do, which is, lots of communications and marketing things. I communicate in this professional world, in this nonprofit like organizational world. I also communicate from the stage. So those two things actually do complement each other in amazing ways. I get to think about, what are the words that I'm saying? How does this land with somebody else? What are they looking for? I'm thinking about development communications, for example. What are the words? What are the stories that you tell that people identify with and they can see themselves in so that they feel inspired to give? Same thing for singing. I'm thinking about, how do I tell this story that is in the score, whether or not it's abstract, right? Abstract or narrative. How do I tell this story so that the people that are engaging with the performance see themselves in it in a way that allows them space to interact with their deepest emotions, to think outside of themselves, to have empathy, to think through something that is deeply held for them, right? Those are all the things that I'm practicing there. You can do the same thing in all of the stuff that you're working on, right? If you're thinking about something compositionally, that absolutely translates to what you're doing as a performer, and vice versa, right? If you're thinking about something in teaching and you're thinking about something in performing, those things absolutely translate to each other. There was not a day that went by when I was teaching that I did not have some sort of realization about technique, about interpretation, that I later then applied to what I was doing vocally in my performance work, right? And vice versa. So anything that I'm doing performance-wise, I'm like, oh, you know what? That thing that I worked through is probably really helpful for Sarah. I'm going to tell her about it too, right? So if you absolutely infuse each one of your areas of activity with the question, what can I take from this that can complement this other activity or this other behavior that I do, then you are going to start finding that crossover, finding that Venn diagram of things. So take that moment, write it out for yourself, put it where you can see it, like leave it on your music stand, whatever it is, post-it note by your computer, and put it on the background of your phone. Like, ask yourself, like, what am I doing right now that complements X? What am I doing right now that complements Y, etc.? And then finally, Chris asked, what is the best way to ensure you're giving equal attention to all of the projects that you're working on? I'm going to disagree with this. I just don't think that equal attention is probably the way that I would describe it. And I think you're giving attention. I know in my soul, in my core, in my being, that creative work, that any sort of work happens in cycles, right? So we're going to take our cues from those that work the land and understand that there are planting, growing, and harvesting seasons for everything that you do, and you are very likely not in the same part of the cycle for every single thing that you're working on. It's highly unlikely. There are times that it is, and then you're like, oh wow, and that can be a kind of intense time, right? If you're harvesting everything at the same time, that can be intense. If you're planting and you don't have anything that's in harvest mode at the moment, that can also be really intense. So be aware of those things. And I want you to be thinking about, hey, Spencer, thanks. Spencer said this. So that you are, just be aware of where you are in your cycles for the projects that you're working on. Some things may have, I mean, God knows, I've got projects, creative projects that are in a, 2-year planting, 3-year growing cycle, things that take a long time. So it's okay. It's okay. Take that in and realize that you might have a planting season that won't hit a growing season or a harvesting season for a decade. And that happens in creative work, right? So right now, if you had the idea, it's your job to nurture that seed, right? Until it's time for it to start growing, or growing, you're nurturing and cultivating during that growing time until it's harvesting time. So when I get asked things like, how do you ensure that you're giving equal attention to all of the projects you're working on? I say, be aware of what season you're in with that particular project and ask yourself, what does this project need right now? Does it need planting? Does it need growing? Does it need harvesting? And then ask yourself what comes next after that, right? And so the equal attention comes also back to our clarity question, which is, what's my most desired outcome? I want you to be very aware of the ability for us to focus on things so that we're not focusing on other things, like the ability to focus on something because it feels urgent, but it's not really. So come back to that. What's that square where it's like important, unimportant, urgent, not urgent, something like that. I want you to like plot your projects into those squares and be like, what's urgent and important right now, and focus on that. What's urgent but not important, see if you can let those lovingly go, right? That doesn't need you. And I want you to ask yourself, I'm not saying that you are, I want you to ask yourself whether or not you're using that to give you more space for some of the things that are important, right? So we have an ability to get sucked into a lot of things that are, urgent for somebody else, but not important for us. And that's a negotiation. You have to figure out how to either complete that or let that go, and negotiate how to like take that off of your plate when it's not yours to have. Like, so we can get into that at another time, but I think most of if you've worked in lots of different situations, how easy it is for things that are urgent for other people to suddenly seem like they're very urgent for you. And that may not be the case. So coming back to that, giving equal attention to all of the projects you're working on, kind of a misnomer, but thinking about where your most important and urgent projects are, and are they getting the cultivation and care that they deserve from you? And if they are, great, you're doing it. If they're not, ask yourself what's getting in the way. Can you take it off the plate? Can you say, this feels really intense and it feels very important from somebody else, but it's not important to me. Is there a way that I can remove this, or set it into a different time, into a different phase? So that's it for today. We did a longer Fri-YAY because I've been gone from y'all for a while. So I hope that you are having a beautiful summer, that you are staying safe and healthy, and that you are getting to see your people again, and you are getting to make the music that you want to make. And I am just so thrilled for all of the things that I hear about from y'all, the things that you're working on, the things that are filling you up. So do not be afraid to drop me a line wherever you're watching this. I love hearing from you. If there was something that you had as a takeaway from a Fri-YAY video, it really just kind of makes my heart sparkle. So, with that, divas, as always, stay sparkly inside and out.